I've not been engaging much with my musicality lately. I find it difficult to inspire myself to create anything when I'm stuck in self isolation. Usually, when I write music, it's because I was out driving and I saw a bush that looked like a mole, and that inspired me for some odd reason. But when I'm doing virtually the same four things in really the same four rooms, I don't even find myself wanting to write music. So I'm not. I've been beating myself down a bit for not using this time to get creative and create lots of music and art, but the fact of the matter is that I can't force it. So, I'm not. I'm done with it. Well, not done with it. I'll come back to it once something inspires me. But in the meantime, I have decided to use my creative energy elsewhere. Because in the midst of drinking copious amounts of tea, getting addicted to Animal Crossing, and screaming into the eternal abyss, I watched a film that I believe is truly one of a kind. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, written and directed by Celine Sciamma, is a magnificent spectacle of raw human affection and heartache that stands out from the crowd for a myriad of reasons. The film follows the story of Adele Haenel's Eloise, a French aristocrat who is set to be married to a Milanese man she has never met, as she revolts in anger that she may not choose her own fate. Whilst this may be the focus, however, the story is not told from Eloise's perspective, and is rather seen through the eyes of Naomi Mallent's Marianne, a painter whom is tasked with painting Eloise's portrait in secret, so that her mother may present it to her potential betrothed. Now, if you've had the pleasure of seeing the film yourself, you'll notice that I left out an important aspect of the narrative, the romance that develops between Eloise and Marianne. Why? Well, after viewing the film for the first time, I knew that I'd seen something different, but what made it so new eluded me at first. And then it struck me. I had just watched a film that followed the growth of a lesbian relationship that wasn't about that lesbian relationship. And I don't think I've seen that before. Now, of course, there are films that explore narratives of queerness, like Brokeback Mountain, Love, Simon, and Bend It Like Beckham if you subscribe to that theory. I certainly do. But all of these films take queerness as a point of conflict to push the narrative forward, as they allow for queerness to be jarring within their worlds. Portrait of a Lady on Fire doesn't do that, though. In fact, the homosexuality of the romance is hardly even acknowledged. And this is largely thanks to the female gaze. The female and male gaze describe two perspectives of art. Traditionally, women were painted through the male gaze, as objects of the portrait, so that they may be observed and enjoyed by onlookers. Artists such as Gerda Weiner would challenge this, however, painting women through a female gaze, and thus capturing their magnificence and celebrating what makes them beautiful. Through the female gaze, the artist takes their muse as a subject of their work, painting the piece around them so to accentuate their story. So what does this have to do with queerness then? Well, everything in my opinion. The reason that queerness is often a point of conflict in films is because the act of homosexuality within men is seen as womanly. Homophobia itself stems from the sexist ideals of women being inferior to men, and loving a man being the role of a woman. So, when a man loves a man, he must be weak because he's womanly. But notice how I didn't mention lesbianism. Homophobia, of course, has affected lesbians for decades. However, the same mold of homophobia that is applied to men can't be used for lesbians, because when a woman loves a woman, she facilitates the typical masculine role. And to say a woman is inferior because she is manly, well, that brings issues for the patriarchal system at place. So the alternative? Fetishize lesbians. And in doing so, the same people whom fetishize them are able to scold them for existing outside anything that isn't specifically for the pleasure and enjoyment of male onlookers. You'd be right to recognize a male gaze. Of course, without this, we're left with something different. Through the male gaze, homosexuality is a defining attribute, but through the female gaze, homosexuality is simply present within the narrative. And that's what sets Portrait of a Lady on Fire aside, because the inherent queerness of Eloise and Marianne's relationship is not the reason that it's forbidden. It simply cannot be because Eloise is not given that kind of free will. In fact, Nothing about either character's destination is changed by their relationship. Marianne, through her romance with Eloise, does not gain any kind of strength over Eloise's situation. They remain individuals upon soon to be divulging paths. Their relationship allows them to admire each other's beauty, to find themselves within the story of each other's lives, but does not take one of these women and place her within the world of the other. Much like the painting through the female gaze, these women are painted into each other's lives with magnificence and respect. They take in their surroundings, knowing the stories they tell. They look to each other as artist and muse, knowing they have both contributed equally to the artwork at hand. But just as quickly, the background is set alight and burnt away, until when they look to each other, all that is left is nothing but a portrait of a lady on fire.